So we told you this story yesterday, and today we found out that no charges will be laid against the father of a 5-year-old girl who was the subject of an Amber Alert yesterday, but was found safe in Markham. Solomon Jaffrey has been released from custody. He is the 25-year-old father of the girl. The alert was issued after Jaffrey signed his daughter out of her classroom at Armadale Public School in Markham at approximately 2 o'clock yesterday, and the alert was issued after the mother called the police and said she was concerned for her daughter's safety. So police initially said, and this is what we heard yesterday, that Jaffrey was not supposed to have access to the girl, but the school did not appear to be aware of that. And in an interview, Jaffrey said no such order exists, and he frequently picks her up and participates in school events. Joining us to talk about this story is Ed Prucci, our News Talk 1010 Chief Legal Analyst. Ed, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for doing this.
My pleasure.
To me, this is a very strong accusation to make against someone on behalf of the mother and apparently some other people. We don't know who those other people are, but serious enough to have police issue an Amber Alert and fear for the girl's safety. So shouldn't the person who raised that alarm without having real reason to have to face some kind of penalty?
Well, so it depends why that alarm gets raised, right? And what I would say is it depends a lot on the intent of the person behind it. If this is all some sort of misunderstanding where a combination of the school, the mom, her friends think that there's a court order or something else out there that says dad is not to have access to the child at this particular moment in time, and so a series of events occur and a person has a reasonable basis for thinking, wait a second, this is not supposed to be happening, it's an abduction, I fear for the wellness of the child, then you can go ahead and call police. And even if you're wrong about your assessment of it, I wouldn't say that you're criminally liable. However, reading between the lines here, it sounds like that's not the case, and that's certainly not what Mr. Jaffrey thinks is the case. He posted on his own Facebook page after ultimately getting released by police and cleared that he believes this all came as a result of actions that he says are basically out of spite. And so, I think any of us with any experience whatsoever can envision a situation where, really awful custody battles rage, really awful divorce battles rage, and parents will fight tooth and nail to do what they think is in the best interest of their child. And sometimes that includes going over the top and saying, I don't want the other spouse to have access to the child, even if a court either hasn't made any ruling or has explicitly ruled against me on that. And so, the questions I would have are, what documentation was provided to police or what evidence was provided to police and by whom to suggest that this guy wasn't supposed to have access? Because as it turns out, by the time police were done with the investigation, the answer seems to be there's nothing out there. And in the meantime, what we've seen is a person who, it's one thing to get dragged through the muck when, a charge gets laid and your name appears on a criminal docket and maybe one or two media sources pick up on it. This Amber Alert went out with the name and description of the dad, my understanding is, to every single cell phone in Ontario, and it interrupted every single radio station and every single television broadcast. So it's about as bad as can get.
Didn't make it to my phone. Did it make it to yours?
It did. It did.
Okay.
It did to my children's phone. So in the past, I have had issues where it didn't get, Amber Alerts went off and I didn't hear or see anything. This time, the system worked for me.
Well, so it didn't work for me, but even when we were doing the show last night and the Amber Alert had been called off, we had people texting us saying it's still coming across the TV. So yes, it did get blanketed. It did get a blanket reach to a lot of people. I look at this the same way I would look at somebody who makes a false accusation of another parent out of spite, maybe some kind of abusive accusation. I feel like people have to be more responsible and accountable if they do something knowing that they are not telling the truth, knowing that the child is not in danger. The way that the father tells it, he and his wife had a difficult separation about 10 days ago. And he, as you mentioned, is saying she probably did this out of spite. I have a problem feeling like someone should be able to get away with that.
Look, and the criminal code has a very clear mechanism by which we're supposed to be able to stop people from getting away with that. So, of course, we take all of these kinds of allegations seriously. And I'm not suggesting that the Amber Alert needs to sort of be held back until you've done your complete investigation and have all the paperwork in order, because oftentimes that could well be too late. And we just saw an example of that not that long ago in a circumstance where the child ended up dead and now the father's in custody, or actually the father also ended up dead but was in custody for a period of time facing murder charges. So I'm not suggesting the police, hold back in that regard. But when you find out, if ultimately in any case, this one or any other, you find out after a police investigation that you've been led astray as an officer, that you've been told something that's not accurate, that's intentionally designed to get you to launch an investigation and pursue an investigation that should not have been launched or pursued, there is a public mischief provision within the criminal code. It's a very serious charge, and you can and should lay that charge because the integrity of the justice system depends on it. Right now, we operate on what I call, in many respects, a no harm, no foul principle, it seems to be, where police look at scenarios like this and they say, all right, we've sorted it out. Yeah, it took us a few hours, but look, nobody got charged.
Right.
You spent a little bit of time in the back of a police cruiser, no biggie, off you go. And that's very easy for police officers to say. They make these kinds of arrests all the time, each and every day. And to some extent, I don't blame them for this, but they become almost numb to it. They don't realize what the implications are for somebody who's never been in trouble before, what it feels like to have handcuffs put on you, what it feels like to be in the back of a police cruiser where the door does not open from the inside out. We should not be doing these things. And if we're doing them by mistake because someone else misdirected us, the person who did the misdirection needs to feel the brunt of the law too.
What would a sentence for a public mischief conviction be?
So they're not commonly sought, but when you get them, even on first offenses, I've seen certainly short jail sentences to send a message. So a lot of it, and fines, criminal convictions, but a lot of it will depend on how far did the investigation go and how involved was the lie behind the public mischiefs. Sometimes people will make a very sort of ham-fisted, half-hearted report that police should have seen through or did see through very, very quickly. And so there isn't all that much harm that takes place. And a judge might have some sympathy depending on the background and the circumstances and say, all right, I want some counseling to get to the bottom of why this happened. Maybe there's a fine that needs to be paid. Maybe there's probation. But in circumstances where a person actually gets imprisoned, for example, we've had circumstances where a person is denied bail and they might spend weeks or months in jail until it's revealed that the underlying offense had never happened. It was made up. Then turnabout is fair play. And you'll see judges say, look, you put an innocent man in jail. I've got no option but to put you in jail now.
And I just want to touch on something that you said earlier. It has to do with whatever happened yesterday. Mom calls the police. He's not allowed to see the daughter. I assume, based on what you said earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, there is some duty on behalf of the police to say, okay, we need to see the paperwork that says he's not allowed access to her.
I would certainly hope so. I mean, investigatively, I've seen, good police work on these fronts and less good police work, to be kind, on these fronts, where a person makes an allegation like that. The first thing the police should be asking for is, okay, ma'am, what's the custody situation between you and this gentleman? Have you been to court? Is there a court order? Do you have a lawyer? Can you show me that order? What's going on here? Because if it's just someone saying, I don't want him with my daughter, you may have very good reasons not to want that, but unless there's an order in place, you don't have that entitlement. Parents are parents, and parents, barring the court saying otherwise, have equal right to access and equal right to custody. So where's your separation agreement? I don't think it's too much to tell police, take 5 minutes to get the answer to that question before issuing the Amber Alert. And in fact, in this circumstance, police put in a request for an Amber Alert, but as you know, I was listening to News Talk 1010 with Ryan and Jay last night. It took about 45 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, before the alert itself actually started getting broadcast. So there's plenty of time to be saying, where's the separation agreement? Where's the court order? Where's the schooling documents? Where are the custody documents to verify this?
Ed Perucci, thank you as always.
You're welcome.